The San Francisco International Airport terminal hummed with the frantic energy of people chasing dreams. But I sat, in the hushed luxury of the first-class lounge, feeling like a ghost. I wasn't draped in the $12,000 hand-stitched lace gown that was currently hanging in a bridal suite at the St. Regis. Instead, I sported a tailored, midnight black silk jumpsuit, the kind of outfit a woman wears when she's about to sign a multi-million-dollar merger, or, in my case, a death warrant for a relationship. In my hand, I gripped a boarding pass to Paris. It wasn't just a piece of cardstock, it was my liberation papers. 3 miles away, Alaric would be standing in front of a mirror, adjusting his Italian silk tie, perfecting the smirk he used to manipulate everyone, from board members to me. He probably thought I was in a makeup chair, being pampered for our big day. He probably thought he had successfully secured his lifelong cash cow. He had no idea that my private banker at Chase had already flagged his suspicious activity 48 hours ago. He didn't know that while he was rehearsing his vows, I was watching the digital balance of our joint account drop to zero. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my vintage Krug champagne, pulled out my phone, and looked at our family group chat. The blue bubbles of the iMessage group flickered. My thumb hovered over the send button. This wasn't just a wedding cancellation. It was a public execution of his reputation. I first encountered Alaric Vance at a high-stakes tech gala in Palo Alto. As a senior software architect for one of the biggest firms in Silicon Valley, I was used to men approaching me with transparent, cheesy pickup lines, or, worse, trying to explain my own industry to me. But Alaric was different. He didn't use lines, he used intellect. He approached me with a glass of sparkling water and a question about my latest patent. He was charming, soft-spoken, and possessed a quiet confidence that felt like a breath of fresh air in a room full of egos. "Serafina Prescott," he had said, his voice a smooth baritone. "I didn't come here to talk about venture capital. I came here to meet the woman who is redefining cloud security." Within 3 months, Alaric had woven himself into the very fabric of my life. He didn't just love me, he curated me. He knew my favorite coffee roast, the exact temperature I liked my wine, and the fact that I valued transparency above all else. Or so I thought. "We are a power couple, Sarah," he whispered one night, as we looked out over the San Francisco skyline from my penthouse. "But I don't want to be Mr. Prescott. I want us to build something together. A shared legacy." That was the hook. He proposed we open a high-limit joint future and growth account. He suggested we both deposit 70% of our earnings into it. To me, it felt like a beautiful gesture of trust, a merging of two empires. I was earning 7 figures, and while he was a successful VC, I was the primary engine of that account. I poured my quarterly bonuses, my stock options, and my inheritance from my grandmother into that fund. I wasn't just investing in a house in Los Altos. I was investing in the man I thought was my soulmate. Our life was a masterpiece of curated moments. From weekend retreats in the Hamptons to private gallery openings, Alaric was always by my side, his hand resting protectively on the small of my back. He made me feel seen. He made me feel safe. I didn't realize that he was simply measuring the depth of my pockets. The first crack in the porcelain appeared about 4 months before the wedding. Alaric's scouting trips to Austin and Seattle began to stretch from 2 days to 5. He claimed he was closing a massive fintech deal, one that required absolute discretion. Then came Sienna Rossi. He introduced her as a strategic consultant. She was sharp, dressed in head-to-toe Prada, and had a way of looking at Alaric that made my skin crawl. It wasn't professional admiration, it was familiarity. "She's just a business friend, Sarah," Alaric would say, when I pointed out that she seemed to be at every dinner, every meeting, and every private charity event. "She has the connections we need for the merger. Don't be that woman, the jealous one. It doesn't suit your intellect." He was gaslighting me, and he was good at it. I started noticing small, odd withdrawals from the joint account. $3,000 for a client dinner at a restaurant I knew he hadn't visited. $5,500 for a membership fee at a club he never mentioned. When I asked him, he would sigh with practiced frustration. Sarah, I'm trying to handle the logistics so you can focus on your work. These are vendor deposits. Do you trust me or not? I wanted to trust him. But then, I began to notice his phone habits. The man who used to leave his laptop open on the kitchen counter suddenly started taking his phone into the bathroom. He changed his passcode. He began receiving, quote, investor alerts at 1 a.m. One evening, I walked into the study and caught him on a call. His voice was different, hushed, intimate, laced with a tenderness he hadn't shown me in weeks. The second he saw me, his face shifted into a mask of professional calm. I have to go, the board is waiting, he snapped into the phone. The board works at midnight on a Sunday? I asked, my heart beginning to thud. In London they do, he replied coldly. Go back to bed, Sarah. You're being paranoid. The house of cards collapsed exactly 6 days before the wedding. I was at my desk, trying to finalize the seating chart, when an automated notification popped up on our shared iPad. It was a flight confirmation from Emirates. Mr. Alaric Vance and Miss Sienna Rossi, your first-class suite to the Maldives is confirmed for tomorrow. My world stopped. The Maldives? Tomorrow? Alaric was supposed to be in New York for a final pre-wedding funding round. I felt a wave of nausea so violent. I had to grip the edge of the mahogany desk. My hands were shaking as I bypassed his security. He had forgotten I helped him set up his cloud backup. I didn't have to dig deep. I found a hidden folder labeled Consultancy Assets. Inside weren't business contracts. There were photos. Hundreds of them. Alaric and Sienna in places I had paid for. Alaric and Sienna laughing in the penthouse I had bought. But the worst part was the voice memos. He had a habit of recording his ideas for his memoirs. I clicked on the most recent one. The date was from 2 nights ago. The Maldives trip is a go. Alaric's voice rang out, sounding bored and arrogant. Sienna is complaining about the delay, but I told her to hold on. Once the I-dos are done on Saturday, Serafina's trust fund becomes accessible for joint ventures. I've already pre-signed the management transfer. She's so focused on being the supportive partner that she's literally bleeding herself dry for us. I have to physically brace myself every time I have to kiss her lately, but for $100 million, I can play the role for 1 more week. After the honeymoon, we'll move the bulk to the Cayman account and let her logical brain try to find it. I didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears. It had turned into a cold, vibrating rage. I felt like a surgeon looking at a malignant tumor. He wasn't just a cheater, he was a parasite. He had been using me as a cash cow, funding a lavish lifestyle for his mistress with my sweat and my late nights at the office. He thought he was playing me, but he forgot one thing. I built the platform he was standing on. While he was adjusting his silk tie and dreaming of my money, I was already cutting the ropes. I called my private banker at 2 a.m. Marcus, I said, my voice like steel. I need every cent moved out of the joint account. I have the power of attorney documents ready. I want every loose end tied. And I want it done by the time the doors open at 9 a.m. I spent the rest of the night packing 1 suitcase. Not my wedding shoes, not my veil, just my essentials and my dignity. When Alaric came home the next morning, smelling of expensive cologne and lies, I was sitting at the kitchen island, sipping coffee. Rough night at the office, babe? He asked, trying to kiss my forehead. I pulled away slightly, masked by a tired smile. Just wedding nerves, Alaric. I've made sure every single detail is taken care of. Everything is ready for the big day. That's my girl, he said, heading to the shower. I watched him go, knowing that the big day he was expecting was about to become the most public wreckage of his life. I had 5 days to finish my masterpiece. By the time he realized he was standing at an empty altar, I would be halfway across the Atlantic. The morning of the wedding arrived with a sky so clear it felt like a betrayal of the storm brewing in my chest. I woke up at 5 a.m., the silence of the penthouse weighing heavy on me. Beside me, Alaric was still asleep, his breathing rhythmic and calm. Looking at him, I didn't feel the familiar flutter of affection. Instead, I felt the cold, sharp precision of a surgeon about to excise a tumor. I watched the man I once thought was my soulmate, realizing he was nothing more than a highly skilled actor whose show was finally closing. I spent an hour in the bathroom, not doing my wedding makeup, but preparing for a different kind of ceremony. I wore a tailored black silk jumpsuit, a piece that screamed authority rather than surrender. I moved through the apartment like a ghost, picking up my pre-packed suitcase. I didn't take the jewelry he bought me with my own money. I didn't take the memories. I took only what was mine: my passport, my pride, and the digital keys to my empire. By 8:45 a.m., I was parked outside my private bank. I had made prior arrangements with my personal banker, Marcus, a man who understood the value of discretion and the urgency of a woman scorned. "Are you sure about this, Serafina?" he asked as he pulled up the transfer screens. $400,000 is a significant move. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Marcus," I replied, my voice sounding like steel. He thought he was playing the long game. He forgot that I owned the board. Because of our prior coordination, the fraud alerts were bypassed. With a few clicks, the joint account, the one Alaric planned to use as his personal piggy bank for his life with Sienna, was bled dry. Every cent of my bonuses, my hard-earned salary, and my grandmother's legacy was swept into a private, untouchable account. I watched the balance on the screen hit $0. It was the most satisfying number I had ever seen. By 10:30 a.m., I was sitting in the first-class lounge at SFO. The airport hummed with the sound of departures, but for me, it felt like an arrival. I sipped a glass of Krug, the bubbles sharp against my tongue. I checked the time. Back at the St. Regis, the groom's suite would be a hive of activity. Alaric would be putting on his $5,000 tuxedo, laughing with his groomsmen, and checking his watch. He probably thought I was just running late, a typical bride, caught up in hair and makeup. He had no idea that while he was tightening his silk tie, I was cutting the ropes that held his world together. I pulled out my phone. The family iMessage group chat was quiet. I looked at the names. My parents, his parents, our business partners, our childhood friends. This was the moment of the digital execution. I typed the message slowly, savoring every word. To everyone gathered at the St. Regis, I won't be joining you today. While Alaric was rehearsing his vows of loyalty, he was busy using our joint account to fund a secret life with his consultant, Sienna Rossi. I have seen the flight confirmations for the Maldives. I have heard the recordings of him laughing about how he cringes when he touches me, and I have watched him treat my hard work as his personal ATM. Alaric, you wanted a queen to fund your lifestyle, but you forgot that a queen can also be an executioner. To my guests, the steak is medium rare and the champagne is top shelf. Enjoy the party. It's the most expensive funeral for a lie you'll ever attend. I'm boarding a flight to Paris. I realized I'd rather be solo in a palace than a cash cow in a cage. I hit send. The blue bubbles turned into a flurry of activity. The typing indicators appeared and disappeared like a panicked heartbeat. My phone began to vibrate so violently, I had to set it on the marble table. It was a waterfall of shock, anger, and confusion. My mother's name flashed on the screen, then Alaric's father, then Alaric himself. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was now public property. I opened Instagram. My professional network was vast, and I knew Alaric's reputation was his only real currency in the VC world. I posted a photo of my boarding pass against the backdrop of the runway. Caption: "They say the best view at a wedding is from the altar." I disagree. The best view is from 30,000 feet when you finally drop the dead weight of a parasite. Alaric, I tied every loose end before I left. Don't bother checking the bank account. It's as empty as your promises. Hashtag freedom, hashtag solo travel, hashtag business and pleasure. I switched my phone to airplane mode. The silence was absolute. It was the most expensive silence I had ever bought, and it was worth every penny. As I boarded the plane, the flight attendant greeted me. "Welcome back, Miss Prescott." "Off on a honeymoon?" "No," I smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached my eyes for the first time in months. "I'm off on a rescue mission. I'm saving the most important person in my life, myself." As the plane ascended over the Pacific, I imagined the chaos at the hotel. I imagined the priest standing awkwardly as the guests read their phones. I imagined Alaric's face turning from confusion to ash, as he realized he was now a social pariah with a bank balance of 0. He had planned to spend years bleeding me dry. Instead, I had ended his career and his lifestyle in the span of a single flight. 10 hours later, I landed at Charles de Gaulle. I checked into the George V, into the very suite Alaric had picked for us. I walked out onto the balcony, the Eiffel Tower sparkling in the night sky like a silent witness to my victory. I took a photo of myself. No filter, just the glow of a woman who had finally reclaimed her soul. Caption: honeymoons are much more peaceful when you actually love the person you're with. It turns out, that person was me all along. Hashtag Parasolo, hashtag New Beginnings. The aftermath was a corporate massacre. Alaric's firm let him go within the week. No one wants a venture capitalist who can't even secure his own home front without resorting to fraud. Sienna disappeared into the shadows the moment the money dried up. But my story isn't about them. For too long, I thought my value was tied to being half of a power couple. I thought that being a strong woman meant absorbing a man's flaws and funding his mistakes. I was wrong. A real power couple is you and your self-respect. To every woman listening, never let a man convince you that your logical brain is a hindrance to love. Your logic is your shield. Your bank account is your fortress. And your I do should never be a blank check for someone else's greed. If he cringes when he touches you, make sure he feels the chill of an empty life when you leave. I am Serafina Prescott. I am solo, I am successful, and I am finally, breathtakingly free. Would you have the courage to walk away on the morning of the wedding, or would you confront him privately before the guests arrived? Is the public humiliation of a cheater too much, or is it the only way to ensure they never do it again? Let me know in the comments below.